Hello and welcome to another edition of Outbound for Dummies. My name is Praveen. I work in the founder's office at Outplay. I kind of oversee the GTM function and the GTM operations at Outplay. And it's my pleasure to be hosting Outbound for Dummies. For those of you who have been following Outplay and going through these amazing sessions that I have with experts in the field, I know a lot of you have personally reached out to me. Many managers, sales leaders have reached out as to how helpful and useful these sessions are. And that's why I'm excited to do one more session today. And today's topic is going to be how to enable and motivate SDRs. And we have an amazing speaker today. We have with us Adam. Hi, Adam. Welcome to Outplay for Dummies.
Hey, Praveen. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it. Happy Monday.
Well, same here. Adam is the co-founder and CEO of Revenue Reimagined. And at Revenue Reimagined, they're a full-cycle GTM agency helping founders and revenue leaders. So who better than Adam to speak to us today about how to enable and motivate SDRs? You know, I strongly believe this. SDRs are the backbone of any outbound process, right? You might have a brilliant sales tech stack, a very well-defined process. You probably have a very wide TAM, but you still need the right people to go after the market. And most of the times, SDRs are the first touch point for any company, right? So, which is why I wanted to do this session today, because about a year back, I was handling a couple of SDRs and, it was exciting. It was exciting. And if probably I'd met Adam earlier, I would have probably asked the same questions I'm going to ask today. So, Adam, let me start off. Tell me this. What do you think are the strategies that organizations can implement to enable SDRs? Because enablement is very, very important, yeah? So what typically should organizations do to enable these SDRs to excel in their roles and ultimately achieve their targets?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question, right? That's a big question. There's so many things that organizations need to do to make SDRs successful. And I like that you use the word enable because that's what it starts with, right? What you find in a lot of startups, and we work, excuse me, predominantly with startups, is you'll have founders who will hire SDRs, tell them, hey, this is how the product works. Go call people and set meetings for me. You can't do that. I mean, you can, but you're not going to get great quality meetings. I think the first thing that I look at when I'm trying to enable an SDR team is they have to be product experts. They might not be demoing the product. They might be passing that off to the AE. But at the end of the day, you want to equip your SDRs to deeply know the product they're selling. And why is that? You said it. They are the first touch point with your customers, right? So in order to be that first touch point, in order to stand out from the noise, in order to book a meeting, you have to know, number one, how that product works inside and out. Because if you don't, how are you speaking to your ICP? How are you understanding their pain points? And that is the core of the SDR function, right? The SDR function isn't just make phone calls and book meetings. The SDR function is to generate enough interest by identifying pain that ties to real business needs that someone is willing to take a meeting. So you have to make sure, number one, that they are experts on the product. Number two, that they are experts on your ICP. The worst thing you can do is have your SDRs wasting time building lists and calling people that are not in your ICP. Because what's going to happen is they're going to book a meeting because they're good, right? You've trained them. They're good SDRs. So they're going to book a meeting with the wrong person. And that person is now going to spend 30 minutes of their time or 45 minutes of their time with an AE learning all about your product. And then you find out they're not the right ICP. Yeah. So you've got to make sure that they're deeply trained on the ICP. And then lastly, I think the thing that comes to mind for me for enablement is objection handling. We work with too many SDRs where, again, it's book the meeting, book the meeting, book the meeting. And we don't spend enough time teaching them how to naturally overcome the same objections we hear in every single cold call or every single email. I don't have budget. I'm not adding to my tech stack, or we're already using ABC.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to work around that and you're not enabling your team to work around that, you're going to be spinning your wheels, having call after call after call that doesn't progress.
Yeah. Adam, on that thought, right? I think 1 and 2, as in product knowledge or expertise on the product and knowing your ICP are important, but I also feel that they go hand in hand. Once you know the product, you also know whom are you selling to.
Sure.
But I'll take one step back, right? Probably I did not give you a context on what kind of SDRs are these, right? So you're probably, if I were to understand, you said enabling them in these 3 functions is somebody who has been there in an SDR role. Let's say somebody is kind of wanting to step into an SDR role. They need to know, how do I email? How do I structure my email? How do I structure my LinkedIn message? Or how do I even cold call?
Sure.
So don't you think a comprehensive training is also equally important for them, where you take them through every single detailed aspect of what an SDR function is?
So that's a whole different context, right? So now we're
Yeah.
talking about entry-level folks who may or may not have experience in tech. This is their first SDR role, and
Yeah.
they don't know, forget the product, they don't know how to be an SDR.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you're 100% right. You have to start with the basics. And the basics is, how do you even reach out to someone? Is it email? Is it LinkedIn? Is it the phone? Is it all 3? I think what you need to do is teach people how to multi-thread, because clients now, arguably with rare exception, don't live in one space and one space only. You're not just going to call people or just email people. And then to your point, what do you say on the phone? How do you construct an email the right way? I remember I hired an incredible, I've had great luck with teachers, hiring teachers and making them SDRs. We hired this great teacher, and she could write, Praveen, one of the best emails I've ever seen. But it was so long and so detailed that it was a mind shift to train her that, like, the goal of your email is just to pique interest, right? It's got to be short. It's got to be 5th grade level. It's got to have a question. It's got to have a call to action, and super easy. But she started with, and everyone does it. Shit, I did it when I was starting to write. Hi, Praveen. My name is Adam, and I am with blah, blah, blah. I hope this email finds you well. Kill that shit. We don't ever say that. And if you don't have a training program to teach people that, you're going to fail. But before you even teach them how to SDR, I still go back to what I said before. You have to teach them about the product and the ICP, in my opinion, before you even teach them how to SDR. Because what good is writing an email or knowing what to say on the phone if you don't know who you're saying it to and the problems that you're trying to solve for them?
Yeah. But Adam, I resonate this with you. Sometimes unlearning also happens, right? Like I told you a year back, when I was handling a couple of SDRs, I wanted to test waters. So I thought, why not hire people who have not been in the sales field, or probably in the sales field, but not like the typical SDRs that we have today. What do you think is a good time, an estimate of time to get them enabled, get them ready? Should they also learn while they are on the job, or like how do you plan it?
Great question. Every job, whether you're an SDR, an AE, a CEO, a founder, you should be learning while you're on the job. There should always be ongoing enablement, if you will. I think that's one of the things that we did really well at Toast company-wide, is we had an hour every week where the entire company was enabled. Sometimes it was on product, sometimes it was on messaging, sometimes it was on, what our biggest customers were doing and how they were using the product effectively. So you have to have that ongoing training. But to answer your question, what is the right time? It's my belief that if you have someone who is hungry, who's never been in the role before and wants to learn, you could have that person baseline enabled within 3 weeks. Baseline. Wow. They could hit the phones and start sending emails by themselves within 3 weeks. The companies that I've seen do it best actually have SDRs hit the phones from day one. And the reason for that, and it's not by themselves, don't misunderstand me. I'm not going to tell you, hey, here's a book, go call. It's to get them comfortable with that motion and to get them comfortable with hearing no. So you pick your lower end, bottom of the line TAM that honestly you don't care about. And you let them get on the phone and you let them, word vomit and get it out and get comfortable. Because what I found is if you do hire someone, Praveen, and you wait, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and then you tell them to get on the phone, they're like, well, I've been here so long, I haven't got on the phone yet. Like it's almost like an obstacle to start doing it. So you got to train that muscle from the very beginning.
Agree. Okay. I mean, day one, that's surprising. But then, like you said, you also answered my next question, because generally, if you're not enabling them and put them on the field, the chances that, you burn the TAM is very high. But then, that's a good point there. Go to the bottom of the TAM.
Bottom of the TAM, they're using a script day one. Like it's very different, right? Like I have a very strong opinion on scripts. So if I'm hiring someone day one, like you're going to have a script and I'm going to have you read off of it. But generally speaking, as we enable people and as people become more senior, I don't use scripts at all. I'll give, they say this, here's some possible responses. But the last thing I want is someone to get on the phone and read a script. Hi, my name is Adam. I'm calling from, like, it's awful. You have to have that personality. Otherwise, the people on the other end, and the majority of my career, I've sold to sales leaders, right? Like, while we're fun and we're good to sell to, like, we could tell you're reading off a script like it's no one's business. So I try very hard to not script people and to let them have fun with the points.
Nice.
Personality has to shine.
Yeah. But then in this 3 weeks duration, right? You said typically it takes 3 weeks duration. I'm sure there have been times where you felt that they are still not ready to go on.
100%. Sure.
Correct. So what are those benchmarks, or what are those things that you look for to know that, hey, they are ready now? I mean, of course, playing around, testing the field is one thing, but then, you want, as an SDR manager, you want to know that, hey, he or she is going to get me those results, right? So what do you look for in those 3 weeks to know that, outside of that passion and that fire? Correct?
Yeah, I mean, listen, passion and fire is a must. We do a lot of role playing when we onboard people, and it's a lot of, real world, and we're not doing it to be an a-hole, but we're not going to be easy either, right? Like when you call me, I'm going to give you real objections. What I'm looking for is how people are handling those objections. How are they thinking on their feet? Are they willing to say, you know what, I'm not sure, but I'll get back to you, versus giving some BS answer? Or do they know the answer? Do they know where to look for the answer? With emails, it's very easy. So one of the things that I started early on in my career is, for emailing, I actually have all new SDRs and AEs send an email at the end of the day, and it's a cold email, and I respond to every single one of them, and they have to respond back as if I was the customer. That's the best way to do emailing. But the other thing to learn about, whether it's ICP or email techniques or cold call techniques, that I have what I'll call groups of new hires do, because I'm a big believer in not hiring one person at a time, is at the end of the day, we send out the "What I Learned Today" email. And it's 3 things that you learned, and you send it to your entire group of new hires. You also send it to everyone on your team and your manager. And what that does is, certainly for the new people, but even for the people who've been there for a while, there are things that they might have forgot, right? So if you have 10 people writing 3 things that they've learned about the competition, about the product, about email, about cold calling, that's 30 things a day that are going back and forth through this group. Let's say 10 of them might overlap, but that's 20 things a day that are being shared, and best practices and tips about how to get better. And what I found is that greatly accelerates the learning process to have someone ready to get out there and make those cold calls. The other thing that I'm looking for is, and there's no other way to say this other than like lack of fear, right? Like I want the people who are saying like, I want to get on the phone. I want to send emails. The SDR role is the hardest role in sales, like hands down, bar none, the hardest role in sales, which is why it has such a high turnover rate. But when you get people that are so hungry to try it, that's when, in my mind, it's that gut feel of like, all right, like I'm going to let you run. Like I'm going to let you go and have some fun.
Yeah. How do you ensure that post 3 weeks, if you see that, these boxes aren't ticked, without denting on their confidence, how do you put them through the enablement process again?
Yeah, that's a hard one, right? Because a lot of SDRs are typically green in their career. Confidence is something that is important. And if you come back to them and tell them that, oh, you suck or you're not doing well, like that could be debilitating. I think it's really important when you are working with and coaching SDRs before you provide feedback, right? So we're doing a mock call or a mock email or mock objection handling. It's very easy as a leader to be like, hey, this was great. Wasn't so great. You have to take a step back and you have to say, all right, so before I give you my feedback, tell me how you think that went. And oftentimes you'd be surprised how well they know that they either did or didn't do a good job. And it's very different when they come back and they're like, yeah, that probably wasn't my best call because I did this. Then you could agree with them and be like, you know what, you're right. But the fact that you recognize that is huge. And that's going to mean and show that you're not going to do that again because it's top of mind for you. Yeah. That's very different to someone's confidence versus me saying, man, the way that you got on that phone and just talked all over me sucked. You're never going to be good, man. So you have to give them that feedback in that sense. But to your point, if you're going all the way through and you've given the feedback, they've heard the feedback, and they're still not doing great, how do you re-enable them without them feeling like, oh, I'm just awful? This to me is the difference between a leader and a manager. This is when you go to someone and you say, listen, like, I appreciate all the progress that you've made and all the work that you're doing. What I really want to do is set you up for success so that when you get on the phones or when you start sending those emails, you're seeing as many wins as possible. These are the areas that we've kind of identified together that we're not quite there yet. So let's go back and work on them together so that I could set you up for success as much as possible, because this is a hard job. And it's in the way that you phrase it and the way that you bring it to them, in my experience, that actually allows them to understand that, like, yeah, this is tough. And while I need to get better, like, it doesn't mean that I suck. I just need to get better.
I agree. Right. Are you also an advocate of allowing people to use what they're good at? I'll tell you where I'm coming from, right? When I was handling a team, I know there were one or two of them who were good in certain aspects of the SDR function. Probably they were exceptionally good in writing short, crisp emails that will, like you said, get that attention. Brilliant in LinkedIn, but their calling wasn't to the mark, right? I mean, objection handling, they couldn't think on top, right on their feet. It was tough for them. But then they were exceptionally good in the 1 and 2. So are you also an advocate where you say, hey, they're not good at this, just do what you're good at, double down on that? Or you say you find ways to enable them on the skill that they're not good at yet?
It's a good question. My answer is it depends. And I think it depends on the size of your team. I think it depends on who you're calling into, whether that be mid-market or enterprise. And I think it depends on the SDR's desire or willingness to learn more and step outside their comfort zone. If someone is adamant that, they're great at email, but they just hate cold calling. I actually have one of those now with the company we're working with. The next thing I'm going to look at is, it's one thing to be good at email, but are your emails converting? If the emails are converting, or the LinkedIn messages are converting, or let's flip it, the phone calls are converting, but the emails aren't. Listen, man, the numbers speak for themselves. At the end of the day, if you're great at one thing and you're able to bring in pipeline by doing that, that's fantastic. Do I hope that you'll step outside your comfort zone and learn how to call or learn how to write better emails? Sure. But if you're converting a shit ton of pipeline, I'm not going to mess with a good thing.
Yeah.
We're all different. I hate cold calling. I don't do it in my own business transparently. I just don't enjoy it. I could write an email like it's no one's business. I could do LinkedIn like it's no one's business. Will I pick up the phone? Sure. But if I put myself in an SDR's, headspace for a second, if I'm so much better at one thing, my confidence is going to be there more when I do that. So my conversions are going to be much higher because the confidence wins every single time.
Yeah, totally, guys, right. Adam, you were also speaking about continuous enablement, right? How do managers ensure that it isn't boring? I mean, it is repetitive to some extent.
Yeah.
People probably keep listening the same thing over and over again, short emails, crisp messages or whatever, right? So how do you ensure that, how should managers ensure that it's not boring?
So there's a few things. I think number one, excuse me, it's asking the team what they want to be enabled on and making them feel like they have a voice. people like to feel included. It goes to my core leadership style of giving the why behind the what. It's very different if I say, hey, we're gonna, practice cold calling for 30 minutes today, versus, hey guys, we're gonna practice cold calling for 30 minutes today because we've realized that our cold call conversion rates have gone down by 10% over the past 3 months. That's number one. Number two is allowing the SDRs, AEs, other leaders to actually participate in leading that training. If you have someone who's really good at cold calling, let them teach the group on the weekly enablement session versus me teaching the group. No one wants to, like, as salespeople and as leaders, we all love to hear our own voice, right? Like, but no one wants to listen to me for an hour a day every week talking about the same thing. It's much, much more impactful when they listen to someone from their team talking about what's made them successful. So I think that having others on the team talk about their successes and actually enable the team is another way to make sure that it doesn't get boring. Yeah. And then lastly, just staying up to date on what trends are working industry wide. While emails is one thing, it's a whole nother thing to train on emails with AI, or to talk about how a tool can score your emails and how you could make slight tweaks, versus just saying you need to make your emails shorter. I think it comes down to making it different, inviting others to share, and not having it always be yourself.
Yeah, nice. I mean, on that note, Outplay as a platform has both. I mean, it has an AI email writing feature, and it also has an email scoring feature. So like that's a good tool that a lot of SDRs use worldwide. And when they use Outplay, like you said, they know what can they get better at.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, it's important when you're looking at technology. And I shared with you before this call, I have 2 clients who are using Outplay right now that we just migrated over to Outplay. One of the things that's really important is, if I'm going to advise a client on tech to use, how is that tech going to make the team better? People don't have the enablement budgets that they used to have. Like we had a team of 60 sales enablement folks at Toast. Like that's unheard of these days, right? Yeah. So you have to make sure that the technology allows people to be better. And that's one of the things that I love when you look at something like an Outplay or something like an Attention, that actually in real time, as your SDRs are doing the job, gives you that feedback so that you can improve. It also makes the manager's job much easier.
Absolutely right. Coming to the next part of the discussion, let's say 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and they start hitting the road, calling, emailing, etc. When do you think an SDR BDR would see their first success? They need to be patient. Managers need to be patient. So when do you think they should see success? Because it kind of ties down to my next question. That's why I'm asking you this first.
It varies. I mean, if you have an SDR who is calling on big enterprise, that first success could be 60, 90, 100 days.
Yep.
And that's acceptable, right? You have to find other methods of success that you're looking for other than that meeting getting booked or pipeline getting generated. Conversely, if you are an SDR calling on like mid-market, or dare I say SMB, and we could have a whole different conversation about where SDRs should and shouldn't be, 90 days to 120 days, like everyone's going to be unemployed if you don't have success at that point. So I think the answer is you should see success from the very beginning, from day one. What success is changes over time, right? Success for day one or week one could be as simple as you have, connected with X number of prospects, either via phone, email, or LinkedIn. Great. It's activity-based. You did that. Your emails are resonating. Maybe the next metric of success is we start looking at reply rates, or we start looking at click-throughs, the activities. Yeah. Then as we move through, now we're looking at meetings generated and pipeline created. So success should be from the very beginning. What you're tracking success on changes over time. Success for someone who has been a SDR for 6 months is very different than success for someone that's been an SDR for 30 days.
Absolutely.
Right. A little bit of a veiled answer, but sorry.
No, but I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? What I feel, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that most managers don't set this expectation right.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
They don't.
The ultimate work of an SDR is to build pipeline, get meetings,
Right.
build pipeline.
That's all that
right?
matters. Build pipeline.
Yeah.
And that's number one part of why the SDR job is so hard.
Yeah.
Number two, why the burnout, I believe, is so high. And number three, why SDR self-esteem goes to shit. Don't get me wrong. You have to book meetings. Like at the end of the day, we can't forever say you're doing good because your emails get opened. Like that's just not reality. But here's the problem. And I work with a lot of startups, right? Let's say you're an SDR and you have a 75% open rate, which is phenomenal. You have a 6% reply rate, which is great, but you have no meetings booked. Most managers are going to say, well, it's the SDR. It's your fault. You're doing something wrong. Pause. Take a minute. Go back and look at your ICP. Go back and look at your buyer persona. Go back and look at your messaging. Go back and look at your product. Is it the SDR? It might be. But before we assume that it's the person, let's look at all the steps of the process and the product. Maybe it's the messaging that you wrote because you don't let your new SDR write their own messaging, and that's why it's not converting. That doesn't mean your SDR sucks. That means you suck. I mean, it means your messaging sucks.
Messaging is bad,
you have to look at the whole thing before you say you're not booking meetings. It's your fault. Too many managers, too many leaders. It's immediately you're not booking meetings. It's your fault. You have to diagnose the problem before you write the prescription.
Yeah, nice. But during this process also, Adam, how do you keep them motivated? I mean, it could be like various things, right? Messaging is wrong, or for some reason they are not able to have good conversations. Is it still okay that how do managers keep their SDRs motivated?
Yeah, I mean, it's a few things, right? I think, number one, managing an SDR team is different than managing any other type of team. So we'll assume that, or are we assuming that these SDRs are remote, or are they in person? Because that's a very different, how do you motivate them?
I mean, today I think it's hybrid, right? I mean, it's a mix of multiple things, I would say. There is one SDR who are remote. I mean, at Outplay, we are in a hybrid model. They come to office for a few days and things like that. Yeah.
I think there's a few things to keep people motivated. You got to celebrate the small wins. And whether you do that through Slack, whether you do that through in person, I will give Outplay a shameless plug. One of the things I love is that based on certain triggers, I could get Slack messages, or my team could get Slack messages. That's huge, right? We live in Slack all day long. So while you might not be getting the big wins, you celebrate the small wins that lead to the big wins. Shit, your email was opened 5 times. I mean, you're clearly doing something right that it was opened 5 times. You celebrate the team wins. You bring those folks who are booking those meetings, who are having those conversions in, and we study together what they're doing so that we can motivate the person who's not succeeding by making subtle tweaks to their messaging, to their emails, to their phone calls, so that they can have those wins. You have your SDRs actually sit on calls with your AEs, and you let them see those wins that are taking place, because that's going to motivate them so they know that what they're doing on the top of the funnel goes through to the middle and the bottom of the funnel. It's a constant motivation and hyping up and having that leaderboard, if you will, where we're celebrating not just the big wins, but we're celebrating the little wins as well. No one wants to be beat up on all day long.
Absolutely. So from another perspective of an SDR, right? If you were to advise an SDR, what mindset do they need to come with? Knowing that it's a long run, knowing that it's a hard job, market conditions, like you and I know, aren't the best today, hoping that in the coming months, things are going to look up. So what would be your advice to the SDRs? What mindset do they need to carry?
Those who are in the SDR role arguably need to have the most upbeat, can-do, this is going to be a challenge, I'm going to overcome it mindset versus any other place in sales. You have to come in knowing that you're going to hear no a lot more than you're going to hear yes. You have to have the mindset that you look for that 1 out of 50, as an example, wins, and that big win excites you. You have to have the mindset that you are constantly going to iterate, constantly going to need a change, constantly going to need to adapt. Otherwise, you are going to get burnt out very, very quickly. I think the other thing that's really important from a mindset perspective that I hone in on with SDRs is two things. Number one, you got to be curious. You should want to know about the company, the product, the competition, what SDRs are doing, what AEs are doing. You just got to have that innate curiosity to deeply understand your customers and how you're going to make them better. And then the last one is you've got to be coachable. You have to have that mindset of coachability, which is why I think so many leaders look for former athletes for SDRs and AEs.
Yeah.
But you have to come in knowing that you're going to be molded and you're going to be part of that molding. Like, I don't want to make you anything that you're not, but you have to come in and you have to have this innate mindset of like, listen, like, I'm going to be coached and I have to do things differently. And I'm willing to do that.
Lovely, lovely. No better way to end this session, Adam. I mean, I think every SDR manager out there, anybody in sales should have that mindset that, yes, let me go for the big win. Let me be coachable. Let me stay motivated and go for it. Thank you so much, Adam. Those were brilliant pieces of advices to many people, including me. It was lovely having you today with us.
Likewise. Thanks, Praveen. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone. That was another session of Outbound for Dummies for you from Outplay. Check out more resources at outplayhq.com and come back to us again for one more session quite soon. Thank you.